Hello, folks. Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, March 18th. And if you're here for the next installment of Pseudo Wright's Expert Session series, Book Marketing with Dave Chesson. So we are joined today by Dave Chesson, who should need no introduction, but we're going to give him an introduction anyway. Dave is the founder of Kindlepreneur and the creator of Publisher Rocket, which I know firsthand. Several folks on this call use and love. And Dave has graciously said that he'd be willing to come in, speak to our community, and share some of his tips in regards to book marketing and sort of specifically keywords. So we're very lucky to be joined by Dave today. And Dave, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, if anybody's ever heard me do a presentation on keywords, I assure you it's not this one.
Hmm.
This one I wanted to really go in deep because the question was, and I kind of titled it Advanced Keywords. Now, if you're not familiar with keywords, don't worry, we're going to build that kind of foundational knowledge, but then we're going to take it to a next level. So really excited to jump in on this. Was really happy when you guys asked for that subject because this is something I really love to talk about and get really nerdy about. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Start broadcast. There we go. I've actually moved over to using well, it was all queued up there. Come on. I had it all queued up and decided not to. Presentations should be my advanced keyword webinar. There we go. Apologize for that. You know, technology is always fun. And we'll present on this device. Okay. Please let me know if you guys can see my screen, if it's in presentation mode.
Yeah, all
We can
good.
see it.
All right, excellent. So we're going to jump right into this because there's a lot of really important things to cover. And by the way, I'm prior military, so I really try to make sure that I hit my mark. So we're going to go ahead and use the time here, and I'll try to make sure that we have time for questions, but I'll stay on as well as take any questions after the fact. So what I want to do is I want to start by creating kind of the understanding of the core concept of book marketing. All right, now book marketing really comes down to three important things. First, we need to publish a good book. Okay. Now you guys are here and you guys are working on that component, using pseudo write, you can make sure that you're writing and creating a great book. And that's step one. Number two is you have to make sure that the page it sells on looks as enticing as possible. Okay. So just because you created a good book, if you just throw it on Amazon, you don't take time to, craft good book descriptions or anything like that. When people come to this page, they won't convert. All right. So we have a good product, we have a good page. And the final thing is we need to find ways to lead people to that page. Now, at its most basic concept, having those three things really is marketing in a nutshell. But let's talk about that last one. How do you lead people to your page? Now, running Kindlepreneur, we talk about a lot of different marketing forms, okay? A lot of different ways you can either go find the market and bring them to your book or have them naturally discover your book, okay? And these things can be like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, BookBub, promotion sites, email blasts, and swaps. There's a whole bunch, okay? But many of these require having a following or being known and require a lot of work and to build skills. Now, over time, as you build your author career, it's incredibly important to do those things and to prove on them so that you have more, in your tool belt. But my favorite, though, is getting Amazon to send people to your book. This one doesn't need you to have this giant following. It doesn't need you to have major skills or major, budget to be able to fund through some kind of advertising platform. There are things that you can do that convinces Amazon to send their hungry market to your book. Because let's face it, each month, more than 197 million people around the world shop on Amazon. So this really brings us to the next question is, how does Amazon help book shoppers find the right book? And before I get into that, I'll just give you guys a little bit of a brief about myself so you understand who is teaching this, okay? First thing first, I never really thought I was a writer. I actually grew up with dyslexia and just never thought that I was meant to write. And so for me, it was important to not only understand and improve my writing, of course, but also to be able to really understand the market so that my writing had a good chance. Since then, I published 9 international best-selling books on different topics. On top of that, I've become the founder of Kindlepreneur and Publisher Rocket. So I've devoted myself to learning and understanding the market and how it changes. And I've also been a consultant to multiple large publishing companies, as well as New York Times bestselling authors in both fiction and nonfiction. But my favorite thing about this is that Amazon has taken, so everything I'm about to teach you, Amazon has already said, learn from Kindlepreneur on how to optimize your books for more sales. Now, I know that sounds like a prideful statement. I don't mean it that way. But what I'm trying to say, though, is that a lot of people will look at what I'm about to teach and say, well, nobody knows that, or, there's no way you can tell, or this is just a guess. But the truth is that when I publish certain articles where I'm pulling this information from, Amazon has actually outright supported it. And I'm not going to lie, if you go and check their FAQ pages, I have a feeling I could show almost sentence for sentence, maybe some copying of some of my content. So I'll take it as how it is, and I'm okay with that. But so coming back to this, the question is, we come to, there are steps you can take to increase the number of shoppers that discover your book. And that's what I want to really dig into. So in order to learn this, we have two things that we have to fundamentally understand. And that's how to find profitable keywords, okay? Keywords that will drive people to come to your book and buy it, as well as how to use them for increased sales. So just because people come to our book, how do we make sure that those actually convert into sales? And we're going to really dig deep into this, okay? So let's start with Amazon book keywords, okay? And understand truly what they are and why they're important. Now, everybody thinks of keywords and we just think of the 7 KDP keyword boxes, right? When you go to publish your book, you'll find these 7 boxes. You can fill it in with 50 characters. Throughout this presentation, we're going to really dissect into this to better understand what these boxes are, their capability, and how we can get the most out of them. But for that matter, though, really keywords are actually the words that shoppers type into Amazon when they're looking for their next book. And so we need to think about them like that. They're not this magic hack. They're not something where, you wave a wand and things happen. It's the words your reader thinks about when looking for your kind of book. And this is important because 66% of book shoppers start their shopping by using Amazon search, but 89% of that end in a purchase. So this is a real traffic source that is hungry and ready to buy. It's not like Facebook ads where you have to go find somebody who is watching a cat video, convince them to leave the cat videos, come over to Amazon, decide to buy, and then to decide to buy your book. They're already there hungry and looking for a book. And so we just want to get in front of them. So now that we kind of understand a bit of the core basics to keywords, let's go ahead and talk about the data science to keyword searches and why they're important. One of the things that we discovered a couple years back is that when you rank number 1 for a search term, 27% of the people on average that type that term into Amazon when shopping for a book will click on your book. But if you rank number 2, it drops down to 12%, 9%, 8%, 7%, 6%, and so forth. What that means is that the book that ranks number 1 for the term gets almost 2 times more clicks than number 2. This is an important concept because we don't just want to show up for search. We want to be high up so that we get more people. Let's break that down into a couple of numbers, okay? What if you ranked number 5 for a search term that is searched 1,000 times a month, okay? That means that 1,000 customers a month come in and type this exact phrase into the search bar. Now, if you rank number 5, only 70 of those people will end up clicking on your book on average. But if you rank number 1 for that same term, 270 people will click on your book and check it out. Now you may be saying to yourself, hold on, that doesn't sound like much. 270, that's not going to move the needle. That's true, but we're not just showing up for one keyword. We're actually showing up for multiple keywords over time. Not just 7, but tertiary keywords and a whole bunch of other things that we'll discuss later. The key thing is that, no pun intended on that, by the way, the key thing to that is that they all accumulate and grow. And this is a wonderful opportunity for your book to get out there and be discovered by those hungry shoppers. So now that we kind of understand, the core definition of a keyword, as well as the math behind why they can drive sales and help us in growth, let's really dig a little bit further to understand exactly what keywords are. Because keywords are the words that your target shopper uses to find the book they want. But There's a big difference between fiction keywords and nonfiction keywords. Okay. Fiction keywords describe the type of story the book is about. Okay. Now, I'm going to tell you these 5 things here. I will admit that I wrote an article about fiction keywords. It's something that if you guys want to check out and dig even deeper into, just Google fiction keywords, you'll find it. But as funny as 2 weeks after I promoted that, Amazon KDP's official Facebook page promoted the article saying, this is great. And then 2 weeks later, I found that they changed up their FAQ to have these exact 5 in there. So that was fun. And I got a archive.org to show that. But needless to say, though, I think they understood and they agreed with us. But when you break down the fiction keyword phrases, there's really 5 ways that people describe. Now, sometimes they might use one, they might use 2 of these, they might use all 5 of these. But the point is that when you look at the good fiction keyword phrases, a lot of them have different parts of this. So like settings and time periods, character types and roles, plot themes, events and situations, and story tones. So let's start by a couple examples. Settings and time periods. Is it a medieval? Is it a modern? Is it a Western? Notice that when I say the word Western, okay, that could be a location or setting, but that also changes the time period. Now, if I say Caribbean, again, that is a setting, but it could be like the Caribbean, Pirates of the Caribbean, or it could be, a Caribbean vacation. But those words are very important because notice that they immediately change the story. Okay. Character types and roles. Is it an alpha, male? Is it a billionaire? Is it an Amish single mother? Is it, I'm going to guess that that's a guy that can change into, an animal. Is it a wholesome family? Like, what is the main character? And those things tell about the story. Then plot theme. Is it a war between 2 loves? Is it, a summer fling? Is it, what is the theme behind it? Events and situations. I also like to call this catalyst. What kickstarts the story? Is there a war going on in the background? Is it a survival story where a plane crashes and they're stuck on a mountain? Is it a post-apocalyptic? Is it a zombie post-apocalyptic? Is it a dragon post-apocalyptic? There's a lot of different ways that we describe the event. But the story might be about trying to find a lost daughter. But in the background, right, the catalyst is that there was a post-apocalyptic dragons. And okay, that's happening. That might be elements, but the story is this. And my favorite one is the last one is story tone. And story tone is where you sort of describe the different flavors of your genre. In this particular case, like we could take the easy one, which is romance, where on the way left or so we have, wholesome Christian romance, and on the way right we have, super hot, spicy, not suitable for work. And then there's ways of describing it in between. And let me tell you, if you are a romance reader, it is incredibly important that you get the right type or story tone that you want. The wholesome Christian romance writer or reader is probably not going to be interested in, the book covers with guys without their shirt. I'm not knocking on the genres, but I'm just letting you know that they're going to qualify their search with words to make sure that it's the right genre that they're reading, the right type of romance, and they don't get something that they don't want. All right. Now, nonfiction keywords are how a shopper describes the pain point and the result that they want by reading the book. So you can break this one down into 4, which is the pain point. So, oh man, I'm overweight, or oh, I wish, I need to quit smoking, or, whatever this pain point is that's driving me to want to look for a book. Now, on the flip side of that is called the results and solutions. So instead of describing the pain, I would describe the results. So instead of, I'm overweight, the result is to have a beach body. If it's I'm broke, it's to become super rich, or have millions of dollars. But the point is you start to describe the other point, right? The result that you want. Emotional amplifiers are words that help to make it, more exciting, okay, to add more zest to it, whether it's, speed reading in 1 hour, or, 13 ways to a better you. And then finally, my favorite is demographics. How do you make sure that this is for a specific group? So it's not just Evernote, but it's Evernote for lawyers. It's not about being overweight. It's about being overweight when you're also a single mom who has a full-time job. The point is you can start to narrow in on a demographic and it speaks louder to that person. All right, so now that we have an understanding of what keywords are, let's go ahead and look at what makes for good keywords. Now, good keywords have three important parts, okay? The first is it has to be a word or phrase that people actually type in Amazon, okay? The second is that it needs to be words that shoppers then buy things for. Let's face it, you're going to see there's a lot of phrases and words we'll start by typing into Amazon, and then we'll realize, oh, no, that's not what I want. So we'll add more words. We'll add more words. And finally, you'll dig down to this large phrase that really describes the book I'm looking for. And then we go to buy. Okay. So it's not just that they type it in, but that they end up buying. And the third is words that aren't too competitive. Because, like we talked about, if you rank number one for the keyword, you're going to get a lot more traffic than if you rank number five. So we don't want to target something that we can't benefit from. So, words that shoppers really use to search. Okay. So you can start by kind of typing into Amazon's search bar, and Amazon tries to guess at what you're going to type in by adding more words. And you can use that to get an idea of some of the phrases that other shoppers have typed into Amazon before. So as you type in the next letter, it guesses, type in another, and now all of a sudden you can start really building a list. And I would take this list and add it to a Google sheet or an Excel sheet, but build this list of ideas of words that really describe using either those five or four, depending on whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and then start putting them together and create your list. The second is that you want to know if people like buy books that show up for this. Now, this isn't the most optimal way, but this is one way to get an understanding. So let's say, for example, it's intergalactic space marines. Okay, when you type that into Amazon, you go ahead and click on the number one book that shows up for it, and then you can go down to its Amazon bestseller rank, and that's a rank from one being the hottest selling book in all of Amazon, and 9 million being the worst selling book in all of Amazon. But you can go ahead and take that number, and if you go to this Kindle calculator, just type it into Google, you'll find it. You can put the number in there, click, and you can see how many sales that day that book has made. Now, if you have all these keyword ideas and books that are showing up for it aren't making any money, then know that that's probably not a good keyword. Now, granted, that book could be making money from other things you don't know, but that's at least one indication that kind of helps you to figure out if it's a good or not keyword. And then finally, when you come to the words, looking at how competitive it is, you're going to have to make a subjective opinion. Do you recognize the books that show up for it or the authors that are, writing those books? How are their book covers? Do they look trashy? And yet they're making money. That's usually a good sign. Book description, sometimes you might read it and be like, it's terrible. Like all of these things that I have up here are things you can analyze and then make a decision yourself as to whether or not you could beat those books. So those are the three ways you can do that manually. Like I said, you can build that spreadsheet, repeat this process over and over again until you find the right combination of keywords. Now, for those of you guys who have Publisher Rocket, you know that there's a lot easier way of doing this. One of the things is that you can do a keyword search, and it will pull up all of the keywords, so you don't have to keep typing in. We actually have ways to show even more than what Amazon will show. But what's really cool is that you not only get to see the keyword phrases that people type in, you also get to see the estimated Amazon searches per month. So you're not having to make a subjective opinion there. You can actually see that, wow, that term gets looked at a lot. The other thing is it automatically calculates the average monthly earnings that those books are making. And it also gives you a competitive score from 1 to 100, with 1 being super easy and 100 being ridiculously hard. Another feature that we have too that's come out recently is our reverse ASAN feature. And what this does is you can take the ASAN number of a book, put it into our feature, and it will tell you all the keyword phrases that book is ranking for and has basically succeeded from. So if you have a competitor book or you have a book very similar to yours, just take its ASAN number, put it into the system, and it will literally list out all of their keywords for you, which just makes it nice. Now, you may be saying to yourself, when you're looking at my examples, I don't understand the red, yellow, green system. For example, in this, as we see here, fantasy books for kids ages 11 through 14, it has an estimated searches of 642, but it gets a green. Whereas I look at fantasy adventure and it has more searches, but it gets a red. Why is that? Well, what's really cool is our system is actually able to monitor, and it sees that the fantasy books for kids ages 11 through 14, while it might have half the searches, those searches end in more sales. And so our system gives it a green because it's actually a really good selling keyword, whereas fantasy adventure is not. And you can probably justify that by thinking about it, because if somebody typed in fantasy adventure in Amazon, what are the chances Amazon's going to show them the right book, the right age group, the right story tone, the right everything? They're not. And so what we see is we see a lot of people type in fantasy adventure and then they add more words because it's not showing them what they want. And so our system is able to monitor that and give you that understanding. So coming back to this, if you're able to kind of do this over and over again to help you find the right keyword phrases, you would have a list and you can start to see what these things look like. You go after parenting and sure, that if you're writing a book on parenting, sure, 24,000 competitors, there's more money, more searches, but you can start to look and go after certain demographics or certain problems, and now all of a sudden you can start to find an opportunity for either you to enter into the market or at least get your foot in there and start getting readers. By the way, one thing I will say to everybody here too is I love doing this process before I write the book. I was once writing a book and I was able to do this research to find out that, oh man, if I make this small pivot and I write to this demographic, or if I make this pivot and I start adding this story tone, I can start opening my book up to even more people. So while we're looking at the keyword phrases that you can put into KDP, please note that I love this process before I even start writing. And if you can find that with Pseudo-Write, I think that's a pretty good 1-2 punch. Just showing more examples, whether it's from romance or, to different things. So we have romance up here. We have a little bit of genre tone, but what we have is time periods. We have roles and characters, and you can see how these combine to create better opportunities. Just breaking up a descriptive word for, a billionaire romance down to millionaire, alpha male, possessive alpha male, rich man. Notice how those words not only change the story a bit, but it also changes the marketability. There's clearly more people looking for billionaire romance than millionaire romance. However, though, there's a lot more opportunity if you're a first-time author to have a millionaire romance. Billionaire and a millionaire is going to be a different story, a different type of character, different type of settings. The stakes are different, right? But it's really interesting to see that data. So you can do it manually. And like I said, you'll be able to have your list of keywords. You can have your average earnings. But if you're using Publisher Rocket, you're able to expand on that and you can start to really develop, stronger lists and be able to make better decisions. All right. So we've now covered kind of keywords, right? And what makes a good keyword. And you can use manual to Publisher Rocket and you can start to create this list. You've got the list. Now, what do you do with them? How do we benefit from them? And this is where we're going to get into a little something interesting, okay? Because we might have identified our target keywords, but now what we have to do is we have to do two things. We have to index for that keyword, and we have to then rank well for that keyword. So indexing is the process by which Amazon selects what product shows up for what term. So they're saying, okay, you want to be for Dragon Fantasy YA. Okay, we'll put you in that search somewhere. Okay, you might be 7 million, it might be 2 in the rankings. But the key is that you do index for that search phrase. On the other side is rankings. And that's the process by which Amazon selects where the book shows up in the search. So you have to first index and then you have to improve your rankings. And so in order to do those, we're going to again take a look at this because remember, it's not just about showing up for the keyword, it's about having a better ranking like we discussed. The number 1 book gets 27%, the number 2 gets 12, and so forth. So the big question here is how to index and rank well. When we look at indexing, let's talk about these 6 areas in which you can index for, okay? So these are things, and by the way, I have a full-on presentation about how all of this was put together. We had experiments, I have sources, because one of my favorite sources, by the way, just take a little aside here, years ago, Amazon's search engine used to be called A9. Okay, that was its name. It had its own website, it had its own company. It was technically separate from Amazon itself. And what was great about A9.com was they actually put a lot of information that people said they wouldn't make public. And so I do have a lot of the archive.org showing exactly how they said they did things, which is great because it helped to really put this together. Interesting enough, though, a couple of years ago, some of the workers for A9 got really mad at Amazon and made public with, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, which is a fascinating article to read, basically claiming that Amazon was now telling the A9 algorithm to choose Amazon basic products. So, when you go to buy like batteries, there's the Amazon version of it. They were trying to force the algorithm to move the Amazon products above other products, even if it wasn't right. So a lot of customers were buying the wrong batteries because they typed in, I don't know, is that LIV2, one of those little circular batteries, and they clicked on the first one and it was a different one and it doesn't work. So they got mad about this and they actually published it. And what was interesting was that within a week, A9.com was shut down. The company of A9 was morphed into Amazon itself, no longer a separate company, and it was directly reporting to the VP of the online store. So, needless to say, Amazon was not happy about that, and it was very interesting. If you check that article out, it reveals a lot about the company. But needless to say, though, we're going to talk about the things Amazon's algorithm uses to say, oh, okay, yeah, so and so's book should show up in the search somehow. Now, the first one is very direct, right? Title and subtitle. If I type in the title of a book, okay, and also the author name, same thing, Amazon should show that book, right? If I type in the exact title. So this is one of the most important factors. Now, I'm going to talk about the indexing and ranking, and then I'm going to tell you the things you as an author can do to absolutely take advantage in a good way, in a moral way, of this information so as to beat out the authors that say don't understand this. But, choosing your title is very important, especially in nonfiction, but in fiction too. And subtitle is a wonderful opportunity. All right. But Amazon is very heavy on those two things and choosing what books, should show up for things. The next one is keyword metadata, which we're going to go in depth on. Okay. That's your 7 KDP keyword boxes. And how you best use that is going to really matter. Your book description. Yes, Amazon absolutely looks at your book description and uses that information to help it feel better about your book and whether or not it should show up for words. As you'll see later, I'm not telling people to stuff your book description with a whole bunch of things that shouldn't be in there. No. But if your book truly is a epic sci-fi dragon fantasy, Amazon knows that your book description should read like an epic sci-fi dragon fantasy. Okay. They're looking for certain phrases and things that helps it to feel stronger that, oh yeah, no, this is definitely it. Because if you don't put things in there, Amazon's going to be a little bit questionable about whether or not they should be showing you for that. Right. Same thing with categories. They're looking at your categories to figure out, hey, should this book show up for these things? Is this really an epic dragon fantasy or not? If you're choosing nonfiction categories for some reason, then they're going to be like, whoa, definitely not fiction. And they'll get confused. The words that customers leave also plays into it. If people are talking about your characters, if they're talking about the story, Amazon feels more confident that your book is about epic, dragon fantasy because they're talking about the dragons and the fire breathing and the war between factions and so forth. And then finally, look inside. This one's a weird one. It's also one of the lowest on the values, but Amazon does take a look at the look inside of your book to verify that the words there do kind of match with what they're thinking. So all in all, Amazon is using these 6 things to help them decide if your book should show up for certain words or not. Okay. Now let's take a second here and look into that keyword metadata. We did an experiment and to kind of prove this, and it was thousands of keywords, thousands of books to be able to come up with this. But we were able to prove that when you type in a phrase into one of these KDP boxes, Amazon uses every different variation of the phrase in order for indexing. So what I mean by this is, let's say that first box, and by the way, for those of you who don't know, you can put 50 characters inside of each box. And 50 characters is not like Tom Sawyer character. What it is a letter. So an F, an A, a space, a period. All of those things are a character. So you can have 50 of them. So let's say I typed in fantasy mage dragon war. Okay. Well, I would index, or I'd have a very strong argument for indexing for fantasy, for mage, for dragon, and war, or a combination of the two, or a combination of the three, or a combination of four. Now, if I just put the word fantasy in there, I'd index for just fantasy, and that's it. But by putting more words in there, I'm indexing for more. Now, one thing I would like to point out to everybody here is that if you put in some phrase that Amazon A will not show results for, or B has no idea what it is, Amazon's not indexing. They're not going to create a new search result just because you were the first to put it. So a lot of like authors will put in like a character name, like some crazy kooky duke's name, like Yagugagat. And then they'll go to Amazon, they'll type in Yagugagat, and they'll be like, see, my book doesn't show up. It's like, no, Amazon won't just make up a search, okay? So if there is a search result for Dragon, Mage, War, Fantasy, then guess what? You'll index for that because it is a combination, or War, Mage, Dragon. If there's a search result for that, you'll index for it. So on this, understand that every word and combination of phrases inside of one of those boxes does index. And what we saw was, again, for the number of keywords and characters used, we saw an increase of the number of words that you indexed for. All right. So now that we kind of understand the things Amazon uses to say, okay, you should show up for that phrase, let's go ahead and talk about what affects rankings. And these are the 5 things that we found that affect your rankings. And the number one thing of all is conversions. All right. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in depth. But what I mean by this is, let's say people type in epic fantasy war dragon. Okay. And your book is ranking number 1, but people aren't buying it. They're selecting number 2 or number 3 over you. You're going to fall in the rankings. But let's say, for example, you're number 5 and man, you're converting very well. People are showing up and they're clicking on your book and then they're buying it. Amazon's going to notice and they're going to drive you up number 1. Okay. I'm going to tell you some very applicable things you can do to help with this. But again, number 1 is conversions. Number 2 is the degree of text match. So let's say, for example, my title is Epic Dragon War. Okay. And somebody types in Epic Dragon War, man, I have a really good degree of text match. Okay. If, for example, it's War Dragon, then it's not a perfect degree of text match. The same thing goes too, is that and we're going to show this, but if I have 5 words in that phrase, but 2 of them, are the important ones, I have less of an argument than the person who just put 2 in one of those boxes. And I'll explain that a little bit more. Sales history is another big part. If your book has been selling strong or consistent, Amazon gives you more favor and shows you more and better in the rankings than somebody who had a giant spike in sales. One book might only sell, a couple of books a day, and another might only sell like 0 books a day, but has like, 100 sales in one day. And I'll tell you, the couple of books a day one is going to do better than the one that had even more sales in one day. And that's in your rankings. It'll show in your rankings. Price and profitability comes into play as well. This is more something that the algorithm uses for physical products, and same thing with availability and selection. So if somebody's selling a t-shirt on Amazon, but you're out of stock, it doesn't matter. They're not going to rank you well. Or if the t-shirt is priced at a point where, it's not a good mark for them, you're selling something way too high, their algorithm will take that into consideration as well. And one way to look at ranking is Amazon's in the business of making more money. So if your book isn't making more money than book 2 at the number 1 spot, guess who's going to be number 1? They're going to continue to change up their rankings until they hit that, okay, we're making the most money with this book. We're making the most sales with that. So let's kind of dig into this just a little bit more, okay? So we talked about the degree of text match. And the more times a keyword is on the page, the better. The more a keyword matches the specific inquiry, the better. Well, we'll dig into that. Because what we found was on this bottom part, you'll notice that there's the number of keywords, okay? So that first line on the bottom that then goes up, that was the one where you just put as many keywords into your 7 KDP boxes as possible, okay? You're just filling all 50 characters. Now, you're going to show up for more as you move to the right. But what we found though was when you're more intentional about your keywords, you actually rank better. So instead of putting 5 words in there, let's say, for example, you did your keyword research, okay? And I found that Dragon Mage is the best keyword phrase. I mean, it's a good one. There's people searching for it. It's the right one. It fits my book. I wouldn't put any other words around that phrase. I would just put Dragon Mage as one of my KDP boxes. Now that one will rank better, okay? But I also want to keep in mind too that I'm not going to index for more as well. And so one of the things I recommend for people is that when you're filling in your 7 KDP boxes, if you identify 2 to 3 keyword phrases that you love that are really, really good, put them in the box by itself. Don't cover them up with other words. Now with your other 3 to 4 boxes left, then fill them with all the words that truly describe your book. And that's when you get the best of both worlds. You're ranking better for your most targeted keywords, but you're also spreading out inside of your genre or inside of your subject and showing up more. And that's the perfect 1-2 punch. Looking at sales history, again, we talked about this, right? Notice that the yellow is the rankings, or excuse me, the orange is the rankings, and the blue is the sales. Now, the one on the left had a huge spike, and what we noticed was there would be an increase in ranking, like an improvement in rankings for keyword terms, but then it would quickly fall off. Whereas if you look at the book on the right, this is one that was showing consistent sales over time, and because of consistency, the rankings not only shot up, they stayed up. And so again, sales history plays a very important part to this. And finally, we get to the most important part, which is conversions. And this is where Amazon flat out said, look, we continuously evaluate them using human judgments, programmatic analysis, key business metrics, and performance metrics. They're looking, like, here's a great way to put it. Let's say the keyword phrase is Dragon Mage, okay? Amazon has years of data. They know that 9 times out of 10, the book number 1 should sell at this point, okay? And let's say, for example, that Dragon Mage has 1,000 searches per month, and their history shows that the number 1 book sells, 200. Okay. Well, if your book is given that number 1 ranking and you're selling 250, oh, they're going to be happy with you. They might test another new book as it comes onto the market, put it number 1, and you drop to number 2. And when that book doesn't sell, as well as your 250, or let's say it's even below the average, which is 200, they're going to quickly move you back up to number 1 and drop them down. So they know what the past success rate is for these keyword phrases. They know what helps to drive more sales, and they're constantly making it. And so you having conversions for those keywords is what's not only going to get you to the number 1, it's also going to keep you there, especially when new books come in and that sort of thing. All right. So with that, we've covered the 5 things to indexing and the 5 things to conversions, okay? Now, I want to go into what I call the practicality, okay? Because that might be really cool information to know, but it doesn't mean that there's something that you can turn around, take, and do, right? Well, there are. So, practical uses. Let's talk about subtitles, okay? Subtitles play a significant part in indexing and ranking. I believe they help in conversion rates as well. All right. So case in point, this book here is called Temple of Sorrow. Now, what this is a lit RPG game lit adventure. Now, any of you who read that sort of book, those are 2 very important words. I'm a huge literature role-playing game reader as well as game literature reader. I love those books. But notice the cover here. There's no way that you'd be able to know that that's a lit RPG game lit book. It's not something you can design into the cover to help me as a shopper understand that. Unless I know who Carrie Summers is and I know that she writes those things. Otherwise, as a lover of this kind of genre, but also somebody who doesn't know her, I won't buy her because I don't know this. But now that she's helped me to understand that this is my kind of book, by having a subtitle that says it's a lit RPG and game lit adventure, it's helping me to understand what this book is truly about, and I can pull the trigger and buy it, knowing full well that it is my kind. So that does a couple of things. Number 1 is that she's probably ranking better and showing up more for lit RPG and game lit because she has put it in her subtitle, and subtitles are potent. Okay. But the second thing is me as a shopper, I'm going to be more likely to convert on the book because I can see that it's lit RPG and game lit, and it's now more aligned. It's easier for me to understand that this book truly is for me. The next one is the keywords. Okay, so we kind of talked about this, but let's go further. Using all 50 characters did index the book more often. So you could fill in all 50 characters in all 7 of those, and you will show up for more keyword phrases. But we also learned that having specific keyword phrases helps initial rankings. I will rank better for spellcasting if I just put spellcasting as its own box than if I cover it with spellcasting war mage or spellcasting medieval fighting. Let it be its own, okay? So therefore, authors should use both tactics inside their keyword field boxes. So in this particular example, I found 4 phrases that I really liked, okay? That's it. Fantasy war mage, wizard battle, spell casting, and dark magic. If I rank number 1 for those, I'm gonna be a happy camper. Okay. So they get their own box. I don't try to fill in. But on the last remaining ones, I start putting in all of the other phrases that I found that maybe weren't good. Like they didn't have a lot of searches, but these truly do represent my book. And it helps Amazon to see it and say, okay, all right, we'll rank those first 4 better. But oh man, this is okay. This feels like a medieval dragon war mage book. It has all the right things. It's not confusing. And so we'll say that Amazon's algorithm will be more confident to put your book in the right spots because now it feels that it understands your book. All right. One other thing that's important for people to understand too is reusing a phrase or word in your title, subtitle, or category. It doesn't help, but it's also not harmful. It's just redundant. Amazon does have something where it says, hey, they almost kind of scare you that if the keywords in the title, they're like, don't use it in your keywords. Just look, when I'm talking or working with like the publishing companies on this, what I tell them is, hey, look, if you happen to have it in your title or subtitle, like don't scratch your head. Don't burn a whole bunch of extra calories trying to remove it and then worry, well, if I remove mage, because mage is in my title, should I not put, dragon mage? Do I just put dragon? No, just don't worry about it. Just put dragon mage in there. That's fine. Okay. The key is that, yeah, it doesn't boost you because you put more words in it, but don't waste your time trying to kill them off because you also had it somewhere. All right, now conversions. This one's a fun one, okay? Conversion rate, like we said, is the biggest factor in ranking. So if it's Dragon Mage and I can somehow make sure that I'm converting better for that keyword phrase, I'm going to enjoy a much higher and better ranking, and I can stay there. Now, pricing can affect conversions, okay? Think more about how it helps to convert the customer. So when you're choosing your pricing, that's key. This is also one of the reasons why KU books do get better rankings. And I'm jumping down to bullet point number 4 here for a second. If I'm a shopper and I'm enlisted in the Kindle Unlimited, okay, and I see that the first book is a paid book and the second book is a KU book, I'm going to select the KU book because it's in essence, it's free to me. So I'm going to download that one. Now, we were able to find proof that Amazon does give a KU download the same treatment as a book sale. Now, that's not a KU pages read. That's a KU download. So let's say, for example, somebody comes to book 1 and buys, and it's a purchase, it's not on KU, and they buy, 20 copies. But then they go to book 2 on the search results and they download it 30 times because, 30 different people download it. That KU book will have a higher conversion rate in Amazon's mind and it will move up. So that's one reason why authors have said that, hey, it feels like KU books get an unfair advantage. That's what's happening is that it's not like Amazon has a switch that says, okay, only KU books shall rank better. No. It's that KU shoppers choose KU books. And so therefore they get higher conversion rates and they show up more often. So that's a little bit of the secret sauce as to why that happens. All right. So we talked about conversions, right? Making sure that, think about your pricing. If you are KU, understand that kind of helps. Availability and selection. So make sure that you have all the different formats. I love audiobooks when I'm doing fiction, okay? It's got to be a really good push for me to buy the print book or the ebook per se, but I really love a good audiobook. So if, let's say, for example, that book enticed me and I show up, but it doesn't have an audiobook, then I'm probably not going to purchase it. I'll move on. And Amazon sees that it didn't convert. So, making sure that you have the different formats is going to be very important, because you might be losing the customer who only reads a print book or only does an ebook or only does an audiobook. And so that really plays into it. Finally, well, not finally, there's one more, but reviews play a large part too, especially the reviews that show up on your sales page initially. So here's a couple of things about reviews. I mean, the obvious thing is they're important, sure. My favorite review though, is that it's the one where well, let's put it this way. 5-star reviews don't ever get, we actually have a heat map study of this, but 5-star reviews mostly don't get read. 1-star reviews don't get read either unless there's just that one glaring one. Most of the time, when people are actually reading reviews, they're trying to read the 4 or the 3 or the 2. And that's because in the 4, 3, or 2, people tried to give it a good grade. And so they usually put more emphasis on the review itself. So if you got a really great glowing 4-star, call that a high 5, because that's probably going to get the most interaction and really helps. But that's just something that we learned, doing a heat map study on the eyes of shoppers as they go through Amazon. All right. Another thing that you should do on conversions is book descriptions. And now it's funny is I laugh about this is if you had asked me 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't think too much about book descriptions. But then when we started doing all these this research and the experiments, we found that book descriptions are huge. I mean, just a simple change to the first sentence, which I call the hook, can really drive the conversion rates. It can get people hooked in. People will not buy a fiction book unless the book description has really enticed them. So you could create this amazing book. You could do all these great keyword, tactics and drive people to your page, and then they get to the book description and it falls flat and they leave. You lost that opportunity, and Amazon's going to see that loss of conversion rates. So I really do love working on the book description. For those of you who are kind of like racking your brain about it or so, if you just type in Amazon book description generator, I have a free online generator where you can put in your book description, make it look the way you want, click a button for it to kind of analyze and try to improve it, by creating the right structure. I've also got a formula page. It's actually a PDF that has both fiction on one side and nonfiction on the other, showing you the examples and the structure of a great Amazon book description. I highly recommend taking time on that. The book description to me is, there's 2 things that I love to do, and I'm just going to give this as some extra sauce, if you will. But when I'm working on a book cover, I love to show people the cover without the title and see what they think the book is about. Okay. That's such a good test to see how real shoppers will interpret your book. To you, it might be a dragon mage fantasy, but to them, it might be like a necromancer, because you use too many dark and neon and gruesome colors, and they think it's some scary book when it's supposed to be an epic fantasy. Or there's one time that I was working with somebody where I did that test. They sent me the book cover and I looked at it and I was like, okay, so is this a horror book? Like, is this it looks like this is like the movie Seven, where there's really a really bad killer. And the problem was that no, it was an upbeat comedy about a ex-female cop who's now making it big in the city. I'm like, okay, so I thought it was a horror. It's clearly not. You might want to change the colors. You might want to change, how ominous your main character looks. Like, these things change and interpret how people see. So if your book cover looks like it's a horror, but I was looking for a buddy cop, I'm not going to click on it. That's going to hurt your conversions. The next thing is that if I start reading your book description, okay, you as an author, when you're working on your book description, I think it's incredibly important to test your book description with people. When I'm at a party, I'll be working on my book description every time. So everybody's like, "Oh, you're an author? What do you write?" Now, they don't have to be an epic sci-fi, reader, right? Sci-fi military reader, but I can give a book description that, and I can watch their eyes and I can see if they start to glaze over and they lose interest, or when they're actually still engaged. So Mike Thompson's jumped out of 54 different, drop ships, and he's died only 17. What a record, that hook, even if you're not into that kind of thing, you're like, whoa, wait, what? And then you can go into your description. I'm always testing. These things really help with people to kind of connect. All right. And so this is actually something, that you can do a simple change to your book description and you can see these immediate results. The thing too is book launch. When you go to launch your book, I think it's important that authors try to spread out their efforts across a time period. So instead of doing all of your best stuff on the first day, try to make it where it's like day one, day two, day three, and that you're spreading out your sales. Because when you're spreading out your sales, you're going to create consistent sales across, and Amazon's going to look at your keyword phrases that you submitted that you're indexing for, and they're actually going to improve your rankings. They're going to also grow the number of keywords that you index for, and so your book starts to just naturally grow organically on Amazon's site. Whereas if you shoot all of your marketing effort in 1 or 2 days or so, you might make the same amount of books from your marketing effort just in those 2 days, but over time your rankings will drop. You will not have that organic sales and things that occur from that. All right, now before we get into questions too, I want to give one more tactic that I think is really important for people. Okay, and I'm going to pull out of the presentation here. There we go. I think I'm back into the group. All right, one of my favorite tactics to do, okay, that really helps with rankings. And again, please use this for good. This is not about, this isn't about hacking the system or tricking Amazon or anything like that, because, and I'll show you why it won't be this. When I launch my book, you're going to have your street team. You're going to have people who are ready to go buy your book. You'll have your colleagues, whoever it is. What I do is I don't give them the link to the book. Okay. What I do is I ask them, and again, this is only understanding that people will take that extra step. I'll say, hey, yeah, would you mind typing into Amazon Dragon Mage? Okay. And then, you'll know my name as an author. Just scroll down and find it, click it, and then purchase it that way. What that does is that simple act shows the algorithm that, oh, not only is this a new book, but oh, people are engaging with it in that keyword phrase. And what that will do is naturally start to raise, because of your conversions, up to the top. Okay. However, though, the reason why I'm not scamming the system or tricking people is that I'm just giving my book the opportunity to be up there and then to prove to Amazon if it should be up there. Okay. So if I get people to naturally bring it up to the top, then Amazon's going to be looking at it and say, okay, Dave, here is your book. It's number one. And by the way, on average, 200 sales need to happen at number one. And then mine is doing 220. Then I've proven myself and that customers are engaging with it and I should be there. And all of a sudden you'll start to see a scattering effect. So I usually do this for like 3 or 4 different keyword phrases that I want to give my book the chance towards. And if I've done a good job in writing a good book, putting together that cover, making sure that book description is great, and targeting keywords that are right for my book, we will see legitimate good rankings, organic traffic, and engagement. And that is a really cool thing. But if you're going to put in some keyword that you don't belong in or shouldn't be targeting and things like that, naturally you're going to fall. Okay. So I just wanted to throw that one little thing out there. Okay. Like I said, trust the group won't, take and run and do crazy things with that. But that's a really good way to give your book that chance to really shine in the spotlight and prove whether or not it should be on the stage. All right. Now with that, I know there's a lot of questions. And yeah.
Let's see. Nicole, do you have those queued up?
I do, unless Stacy would like to read them out with her lovely little voice.
I absolutely can. Okay, first up, do you offer success stats comparing software to generate marketing versus on our own?
Generate market on our own. If we're talking about manual to publisher rocket, I mean, I don't have exact success stats, but just looking at the data that you would get from it, makes a lot smarter decisions. And I think it's evident with regards to using like software to help with other marketing, whether that's like helping you to auto generate your social media posts or things like that. I don't. Um, yeah, I don't know if I answered that one correctly.
I mean, I'm biased because I do absolutely use um, Publisher Rocket, but I can say that the time saved by using software instead of accumulating and going through and checking your own keywords or phrases, that adds up really quickly. That's time you could have spent writing another book.
Yeah, that's a one way specifically with Publisher Rocket. I think one really key thing is Publisher Rocket is a one-time fee. That's it. So you don't have to pay monthly or anything like that. What I love to tell people is, hey, look, if Publisher Rocket in your entire author career helps you to sell 60 more books, then it just paid for itself. If Publisher Rocket in your entire author career saves you, say, 10 hours of research for either your keywords, your advertisements, your category selections, things like that, again, it also paid for itself as well.
Next question. The Kindle bestseller calculator, does it include Kindle Unlimited?
No, because so Kindle Unlimited, you can see the ranking of the book, and what it will do is that it will tell you kind of in general like how many conversions. It's not able to figure out how much money that book is making because it depends on the pages read. So let's say like 1 million people download the book, but nobody ever opens it or reads it, then you make $0. Whereas if let's say 100 people download it, all 100, that person's going to make more money. So it's not able to decipher how much money the book makes if that book were KU, because it can't figure that out. What it does is just assume that all of the Amazon bestseller rank is attributed to sales.
Next question, and I think we covered this in part. How important are reviews? And at what number of reviews does it start to impact the Amazon algorithm?
Yeah, we did a major test on this to try to figure it out. There's no magic number. I know that I've heard people say like 20 or 25 or 50, or, I've seen those numbers over the years. I never saw any difference in rankings or the number of keywords that you index because of the reviews. But what I do see though is that when you have enough reviews, you sort of have social proof on the book. So case in point, nobody wants to be the first person to buy a book that doesn't have any reviews. But I feel more comfortable buying a book, and I feel less on guard and needing to research it if I see that there's, hundreds, 5-star reviews. So on the surface, that's key. But what I will do, and what we saw in our research from the heat map, is if I do go to read reviews, I like to read the ones where people are trying to be constructive. All right, they're not a 5, glorious, oh my goodness, everything's perfect, and they're not a 1 where I hate it stinks. It's that 4 that's, well, there was something that stopped me from giving it a 5. I want to know what that is. Or hey, it's a 2. There was I didn't hate it, but this wasn't good. Great. And so those really get a lot more attention.
Agreed. I can say that quality of review oftentimes is more beneficial to you to a point than the number of reviews, until that number kicks in to where you just, it's that magical, oh, this has a lot of reviews, that a lot of number that people are like, it's good. So what does it tell you when a keyword has a high number of searches, but low average monthly earnings? Are there
Yeah.
some keywords that people are less likely to pay money for?
Yeah, absolutely. The mass majority of them are ones where it doesn't actually describe the kind of book. So case in point, like imagine that I type in sci-fi, sci-fi book. Like what are the chances Amazon's going to show me the kind of sci-fi? And so what we see is customers will naturally start with something, and then they'll realize, so like, let's say we go to romance. If I say second chance romance, well, I'm going to see a whole bunch of covers with dudes without their shirts on, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, whoa, 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 okay. And again, I'm assuming there's nothing wrong with it, but I'm assuming that the shoppers, let's say Christian wholesome romance, okay, they like that, but they want a story on second chance romance. So then the person will add in second chance romance, and then they'll add some. I'm sorry.
Sorry, that was my robot.
Oh, okay. they'll have second chance romance, and then they'll add something weird like with baby, okay, with child. Now that sounds like weird, right? But what they're thinking is they had their first statement, and then they'll add something in there that says, well, she's with child. So it's not going to be one of those, right? Like, so they're adding elements to the story to help make sure it stays in the right genre tone. And so now you start to see keyword phrases built out that give a little bit more description about the phrase itself, the book itself. And that, which is funny, the second chance romance with baby is actually a really good selling keyword. It's a good opportunity, and it's one weird way that a lot of people are describing a second chance romance where it's really about a family and finding love again while still being a single mother. And so these are kind of, that phrase will make a lot more sales than if you just rank for second chance romance. So we see a lot of people will start with a very broad and non-descriptive phrase, and they'll just keep tacking onto the phrase until they get to something that really drives to be like, ah, that's what I'm looking for. That, I want that. So we do see a lot of that. There are some outliers too. There's a lot of misspellings. Those definitely drive a lot of searches because we're not the most grammatically or correct when we're typing in search phrases. And while they get a lot of searches, people, change up their mind or they want to correct it and they still don't purchase from that one. So just something to keep in mind.
Okay. Do searches include KU? So keywords and number of competitors, so on.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Can you show again, and/or since you've stopped sharing, just briefly reiterate the happy range between search numbers plus competition?
Yeah, that's a really hard question to answer because, like, for example, no joke, by the way, I was working with somebody who was writing on air fryers in what is it? Not Winnebago's. Using air fryers. Yeah, like an Airstream. It was RV, or anyways, it was using an air fryer in RV. And the reason why that was important was because, I mean, this person really niched down, but there was actually good searches for it, like 80, 90. But let me tell you this though, if you wrote a book on air fryers and RVs, okay, and there's 90 people a month typing that exact phrase, and you're by the way the only book that really actually covers that, you can basically guess that 90 out of those 90 are going to buy your book. Whereas, if you're writing on something that's, a lot more broad, like I said, it really depends on your genre. It depends on the subject matter. It depends on how you niche. So that's really hard. But the key thing to remember, though, is it's not just one word or phrase. It's the combination of things together. It's, you're ranking for this, 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 and this, and they're all trickling in traffic that helps to grow your book and its discoverability as a whole. But you choose something as super niche as like air fryers on RVs, which again, it's about space management. There's things on electrical, and that's why this person who travels on them decided they want to do it. Cool. But it's one of those things where you can't really expand it beyond, and people who aren't on RVs are not going to buy it. So you did choose a demographic and niche down, and that person has done well, but they're not going to beat out, a book that's ranking number one for air fryer recipes.
Okay, when it comes to not wanting to repeat keywords in the various or in those 7 keyword fields, is there ever a reason to do it anyway? So basically balancing not wanting to waste some of those 50 characters versus wanting to hit that specific phrase.
Yeah, if it's a phrase that you really want to work towards, like really, really want to, then make sure it's in your subtitle. The subtitle is very potent. It's more potent than what you have in your 7 KDP keywords. So, I mean, if you really want it there, pop it in there. But like I said before, when I come up with my keywords, I'm not worried that if I also use it in a subtitle or title, that I should like take it out of my 7 boxes. I choose the best title and the subtitle. I use my information from keywords to try to put together a subtitle, because the subtitle is your target market's words, right? That's how they describe the story. And if I can choose some phrases that really fit and do help the sell, then great. But when I come to my 7 KDP keyword boxes, I'm not saying, okay, we'll scratch that out because I put it in there. Oh, can't use that. I just go with them the same way. Just understand that, if I have it in my, don't take the effort or action to say, I want this keyword so much, I will make it my title, my subtitle, I'll put in my KDP keywords, I'll put in my book description. I found that it really doesn't provide any more improvements because you put it in more. Okay. And I think that's something that Amazon set up in their systems just to make sure people aren't keyword stuffing.
Next, we have how good are Publisher Rocket's results on international submarkets of Amazon? For example, only for the German market.
Yeah, so we're very strong in the German market. That's one of the first ones I actually entered into. We have the UK market. And by the way, in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we'll be adding the internet or Italian, French, Canadian, and I need to check my records on the last one. But we'll be adding those markets. Now, the way that we do that is it's not one of those things where we just take some simple calculation. We've actually been collecting data for a long time on them. And that's because there's a lot of information we have to crawl. We also, I didn't talk about the category systems, but our system actually logs every category system on Amazon. It shows the sales trends over time. It gives recommendations on what's happening. It helps you with understanding best pricing in those categories, whether or not it's heavily KU, so that if you're on the fence between should you or shouldn't you do KU, it helps to give you recommendations based off of the categories you select. But the other important thing too is it tells you what is a ghost category. And if you don't know, even though Amazon has 14,000 categories on their system, 1/3 of all of those are what's called a ghost category. And those categories are categories where if you select it, you can't become a bestseller because they don't exist. They're ghosts. It's weird. I have my theory as to why Amazon does this, but even if you're the hottest selling person in that ghost category, you won't get the bestseller tag. And by the way, people who are shopping categories can't find you because that category page does not exist. There's no way to really figure that out. It's really looking into the URL, and there's a little bit of HTML coding to kind of figure it out. But then you can figure out, oh, that's a fake. My theory on why Amazon did this is because when Amazon has had a lot of requests for different categories, there's a lot of changes. There's also a lot of political categories that I think Amazon kind of wanted to just, okay, people on different sides of on the spectrum, here it is, but they don't want it to be as found. I think that's one thing. The second thing is that when they have to keep adding categories, it's a lot of changes to their website and their sitemap and their structure, their web structure. And that's a lot of work. So what they can do is they can create a category and make us authors happy, and then they don't have to do all that other work. And so I think they've created this entire section of these ghost categories. So whatever you do not select a ghost category. It will do you no favor. It will help you in no way. So avoid those like the plague.
Are misspellings in the keywords a big problem, or will that be accommodated for in some way on the back end?
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. Number one, Amazon does flat out say do not intentionally use misspellings in your keywords, and they will flag you in case they see it. But here's the other thing too. One of the things we found is inside of your 7 KDP keyword boxes, Amazon automatically applies plural for you, kind of subtle variations to the keyword phrase, as well as the misspellings. So, if you misspelled defense, or let's say you spelt it UK version instead of US version, it will rank for both. It'll figure it out. If you misspell something or they misspell something, Amazon can figure out, oh, that's close to this phrase. And so it all works out. So you get the benefit of all that. So don't try to say, okay, well, if it's dragon, then dragons, and then dragon, don't worry about it. Dragon covers all that.
Excellent. So do you have recommendations for how to test if your keywords are working? And would you update your keywords periodically and track if that made any difference?
Yeah. So I have an article all about the step-by-step process to this. And it's just type into the Google something like changing my Kindle keywords. And what I like to do is when I have my book, I like to change 2 boxes out of 7 at a time. Okay. And the reason for this is that I will copy the original phrases I put into 2 of those boxes, and then I'll put in 2 new ones. And then I monitor my KDP report, to see my sales. If my sales drop immediately, boom. Okay, I know that those 2 boxes are really filling in some juicy keywords, so put them back in. All right, and then I'll go to the next 2. And I'll do that periodically just to test and see. What I have found is that when you do change your keywords, you do give yourself a little spike and jolt. So either A, don't freak out quickly, and get super excited when you see a bump in sales. But what you want to see is a bump in sales that kind of hold, okay? And that's really important for figuring out what keywords are working for you. And if you're writing in a series, that's an amazing thing to do, because now when you come out with book 2 in your series, I love to reuse some of the keywords from the first book. Okay, I've hopefully identified the best ones. I'll put them in, and then I'll put in some new ones in there. That helps me to connect my book 2 to my book 1. Okay, a little bit, but then on top of that too, it helps it to spread out a little bit more. And we found that that's the best process to writing books in a series.
So what about filler words? We noticed in your examples, you didn't use words like of, a, the, avoid
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, avoid those unless it's if you identify a phrase, okay, like you use Publisher Rocket, this exact phrase, like the king of the world, okay, let's just say that one. I would put the exact phrase into my 7 KDP boxes, okay, like it by itself. But that being said, though, is please note that, if you're thinking, well, should I put the and these kind of things, I wouldn't go out of my way to do that unless my research showed me that that exact phrase is perfect. And the reason for it is that when we shop on Amazon, we don't shop with, phrases like, I would like a blue shirt with, red buttons. We just type in blue shirt, red button. And that's it. We leave it as such. So the algorithm works kind of the same way. So don't feel like you have to add in those other things to make it fit.
So is it true that Amazon could refuse to put you in a genre, or could refuse, yes, to put you in the genre if in the subtitle, if the subtitle is not on the cover?
What's funny is I love this question. Because the lawyer in me, which I'm not a lawyer, but the lawyer part of me wants to argue. Amazon's really weird about this on the subtitle. It would take me about 15 minutes to explain, so I'm going to give the real quick notes on this. But this is a subject that really boils my blood. Technically, if you read their FAQ, their instructions, the way they write it is stupid confusing. Okay, they say here's the things your title has to be on the cover. Then it says all these other things. Okay, when you get to the subtitle, it then says do the things as mentioned previously on the title. But the way the exact way they say it is eluding me. But in a way, it doesn't necessarily mean all things that were covered in the title, just this one particular thing that was covered in the title. I believe that also confuses Amazon people. So the humans, as I call them, that work on KDP and verify, okay, this book has these things. Many times the humans interpret it that, no, it's just the title. That's it. And many, many times the humans say, no, the title and subtitle have to be on the cover in order for it to pass. So the humans are confused. The Amazon humans are confused about it. So we're kind of left in the backwash. What I'll say is that you have the safest manner of making sure that your title and subtitle are on the cover, because I've never seen one of those that just think the title rejecting a book because they also found the subtitle. See what I mean? Now, if you may be saying to yourself, well, Dave, you have that LiterPG game lit thing on that one book. Do I really want to put it? That's okay. Put it in small print. And the reason why is that because it will say title and then right under it, this little small print. But remember too, if your cover looks like this, okay, to you physically here, remember on Amazon, it gets shrunk down to that, right? On the sales, on the search results. So people aren't reading those small little words. So you're not killing your book cover by having it there. And so that's one little kind of design hack. and just to make sure that, yes, if you put something in your subtitle, but you don't really want to waste space on your cover, just make it tiny. And then it's not really going to be seen. It's not going to take up too much.
Is keyword dumping in the book description or blurb being punished?
So I personally don't like keyword dumping. Okay. And that's the act of putting as many of your keywords in there as possible, because the most important thing is conversion, right? That's what we want most. Nothing will make me reject a book description faster than I show up and I see them dumping keywords in there just to put them in there. I've even seen ones where they'll put an entire line of just every word. I see that more in the nonfiction, by the way. But what I mean by this is that if you have a book description and it's like, the Nefarian aliens attacked Earth, and the war lasted for 44 days. You can use very sci-fi military phrases to bolster that. The intergalactic war found itself at the footstep of, or at the doorstep of Earth's frontier, with interstellar bombardment destroying and battle cruisers flying above. The world as we knew it would never be the same. I just made that up right off the top of my head. I know it was kind of like off, but the point though is that I used very key sci-fi military terms. It sounds way better. It's the same thing, but it sounds way better. So I love to have my list of keywords over here, write my initial, book description, and then find ways to give it more gravitas, more, as I like to call it, genre gravitas, where I'm using the phrases. And you guys who write, in fiction, those words and phrases, the subtleties. In the fantasy world, you guys know the difference between a necromancer, a mage, a sorcerer, a magician. Like, instead of saying a spellcaster, like, you can, well, that's actually a pretty good word, but like a man or gal who can do magic. You can call them a war mage, a battle mage, with spell casting skills. Like, there's ways to give it more of genre gravitas. And I love that. And what's great about it is you're improving the conversion rates. You're improving your book description, which improves your conversion rates, and just happens to use your keywords to strengthen your argument for ranking for those. It's a beautiful symbiotic relationship at that point.
Are Kindle keywords and paperback keywords the same? So when you have them linked together, should you use the keywords?
So me personally, I have never seen any data that provides that there is a benefit to give different keywords between the two. I know that some have said to, like, okay, on your ebook, do a whole set, on your print book, do a whole set. I've seen, let's put it this way, I don't have conclusive data to prove it. So I personally just choose to use the same keywords between the two. And I think that and the reason why I think that, again, I'm going to try to stress when I don't have data or proof, but here's my feeling. So I'm going to pump that and say, my feeling is that Amazon gets confused by the fact that you have the same book with the same content, but you're changing your stuff. It's not like they penalize you, but the whole purpose of your metadata, right? Publishing your book, filling in that information, like your keywords and categories and stuff, is to help Amazon feel comfortable with what your book is about. So I don't have a good answer for that. But the way that I do it is I just treat them the same. I've heard great arguments from others to say otherwise.
So when someone types their ASIN into Rocket and it comes back with an initial book selection, if that author doesn't think that selection of books really fits theirs, should they trust Rocket or themselves?
Well, so this is the reverse ASIN feature. What the reverse ASIN feature is doing is it shows you what the book showed up for. Okay. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the person chose those 7 keywords. Okay. As a matter of fact, you'll see there's a heck of a lot more than 7 for many of the books, especially those that have been around for a bit. What it is saying is Amazon thought that the book should show up for these things. And so it did show them, and this is show them well, so in the top 10 for these phrases at some point. Now you can start to see that Amazon believed this was a good phrase for that book. You can use your subjective opinion to say, okay, whoa, they got that wrong. Here's a great example though. There was somebody a while ago who used the reverse ASAN, and it was a post-apocalyptic supernatural book. The problem was that the book was showing up for a whole bunch of zombie terms. And this author was like, so they did the reverse ASN, it's all these zombie apocalypse terms. And they were like, what gives? It's not a zombie book. And I was like, I don't, just to let you know, Amazon for some reason thinks it is. Amazon is choosing to put your book in front of zombie search terms. And they were like, well, that's ridiculous. I'm like, it's Amazon's results. What happened was two things. Number one is that the person did select by mistake a category that was a zombie category. So when looking at their metadata, they actually did list it as such. But the second thing, and this was also the other telling part, was that there was a zombie, like they made a joke about, and it was about this guy and gal in a library, stuck in a library, but they made a joke about, it's the apocalypse. It's got to be a zombie apocalypse, right? Well, the Amazon algorithm didn't, they took the two things. It was like, it's a zombie. Plus, they didn't use a word like horde, and running, and there was another phrase, and I can't remember that all of a sudden you could start to see why Amazon was thinking so, and all of a sudden it explained why this person had a lot of people coming to the book, but it wasn't converting as well. So you can use the reverse ASAN as what I call the Amazon goggles to see how Amazon sees your book and what and try to explain why they're showing your book for these phrases, because they got confused about something that you put in your description or the keywords you selected, or the categories you selected. And so that can really help you to kind of understand how your book did and why. But like I said, too, if you're putting in a competitor's book, you can see the phrases that they're showing up for. And you're like, oh, that's a good phrase. Great. Copy, paste. Go through another competitor's. Ooh, I like these. I'm going to take those. And now it just makes finding keywords that much easier.
Hey, Stacy.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if you saw my message or whatever, but we know he's already gone a half hour over. So if you want to look through and maybe grab a couple that sound really good.
Absolutely. Perfect one right here. When writing a series, if there is a keyword that applies perfectly and is a really good seller to books 3 or 4 in that series, but does not necessarily apply to books 1 or 2, would you still use it in the keywords of books 1 or 2?
That's a good question. So long as it's not misleading, I would say yes. And especially for the reason of the person who bought book 1, let's say, I don't know, let's just make something up for just example purposes. Book 1 had a dragon, but book 2 is a, zombie theme, and book 3 is a disease, right? You're going through all the different post-apocalyptos, in book 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And dragon really helped. Okay. I would possibly still use it because what I would hope is that, let's say somebody went on Amazon and bought my book 1 a while ago. They might not have signed up for my email list. They might not have realized that book 2 came out or book 3 came out, but I'd love to get back in front of them in case they're shopping for dragon books, because then they'll be like, oh, I didn't know there was a 4th book. Oh my goodness, I love book 1. I better go find book 2. And so you're getting in front of that group again. So that is one of the reasons why I'd consider it. But if it's something completely way off or so, I'll let you kind of use sort of your ethical moral code on that one and see if that's okay. But yeah, that's one reason why it can help.
Yeah, I think in particular for this question, in a romance, if you know the series or the type of romance is going in a certain place, absolutely, I as the reader would have the expectation for even the first 2 books to be classified as such.
Yeah.
Final question, 2-parter. A, how long would you wait before testing out those new keywords? And B, what if someone tests out these new keywords, sees a drop off, changes it back to the original, but they don't see their sales return?
Okay, so the 2-parter. I personally don't like to change out my keywords until I've done my marketing push in a book launch. I don't think that's the time to really be playing with them because you got way too many variables happening. So you don't know if maybe it was that site promotion that just had this surge and you think, oh, I changed my keywords and now it's surging. So you're thinking that it might be wrong. You might have actually hurt your keywords, but you won't know it because it was covered by something. So first off, I like to go through my marketing launch, know that everything's gone through. And then when I've kind of run out of things, maybe I'm just doing Amazon ads to kind of keep things, some organic sales going. And then I might actually play with the keywords themselves, change out to, and go from there. A good thing, a good indication that you should is you start to hit a baseline. Okay. Whether that's like, 2 sales a day or 0 sales a day, like, those things are a baseline, not you're still jumping around because things are happening. You can't figure out what the baseline is. You have too many irons in the fire, so you won't know. With regards to your sales dropping, I mean, it technically can happen. I don't see it, or I haven't seen it, not with my books or anything. I haven't had reports of it happening where they changed the keywords. The only time that I've heard was that, again, the person did it without a baseline and, something was doing great. One time I did have somebody claim that it was the changing of the keywords, but kind of find out they shut off their Amazon ads as well. Now, the reason why you might be saying, well, that would be obvious. Not exactly, because a lot of times people will do Amazon ads and they'll see that their ads report is showing that they didn't make a sale. But what they don't understand is they've actually been making sales. It's just been either improperly recorded by Amazon or that the sale is attributed to something else. Case in point, somebody clicked on your ad and then they went over and found your book on Audible, because audible.com. And so that's not recorded. And so what ended up happening in this particular case was the author thought that when they changed their keywords, that's what dropped. And then they had mentioned that, oh, they just turned off their ads. And I was like, that's another one. Another thing too to keep about in ads too is that if you're on KU, it doesn't attribute, sales as in, money made with your pages read, right? So just because I did this ad, it drove this person to download. That person might have downloaded the book, but let's say 2 months later they read it. Well, I get paid 2 months later, but the ads, dashboard isn't going to show that. So just something to kind of keep in mind. Also, to talked about the popularity effect. If your Amazon ads are selling, let's say $2 or 2 books a day, you're building consistent sales. That consistency really helps with your rankings. And so when that person shut off the ads because they were like, oh, I don't think I'm making as much, their rankings dropped because they were no longer making consistent sales. So just another thing to kind of keep in mind as well. So to answer that question legitimately is, have a baseline, make sure you don't have a lot of variables out there, things that are changing it. Once you have that, you can start to change the keywords and know that your changes are really taking effect. And again, I haven't exactly seen anything that drives it where you can't replace it. I've seen it replaced. Doesn't mean that it can't happen. So that is a risk to keep in mind.
All right, that concludes the Q&A for today. Dave, you were so kind to go almost 30 minutes over. Cannot tell you how much we appreciate that. Thank you.
Ah, no worries. And again, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Dave. So for anybody who joined late, we're going to get this recording up very soon. We appreciate the great questions. And once again, really appreciate all the time today, Dave.
Absolutely. Well, again, thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see you all soon.